If your round one recommenders were all supervisors who didn't work with you that closely, or they were your team lead or a senior person in your team, maybe 2 to 3 years senior to you, they they don't have the vocabulary or the insight to capture a perspective about your journey that your current supervisor can offer. So this is the tricky part. So is it worth taking the risk? If you apply to 3 to 5 schools in round one with multiple supervisors or senior persons in your team, and you were rejected in most schools without an interview, that's a clear sign that either your essays didn't work or your recommendation letter didn't work. And if you are applying to 3 to 5 schools in the top 15 list, the essays are extremely diverse. Unless your writing is so bad or you don't know the concept of storytelling, it's unlikely to be essays. So you have to go back to the essays, send it to consultants, send it to editors and reviewers, and see if it is the essays. You can share it with me at editor@fngmath.com. I will give you a quick review. Now, if it is not the essays, then certainly it is the recommendation letter. You should take the risk and go to your current supervisor. That single deliverable will enhance your candidacy by a huge margin. Even if you're going to your current supervisor, you should know your relationship with that supervisor. So the first case is if you have a formal relationship. That is, the person is assigning you tasks, you're completing them, meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, and in some cases, missing the target by a few margin. But mostly you have delivered. So that is the kind of relationship you have with the supervisor. It's a very formal relationship. Now, it works for schools in the 5-15 rank. But for any school in the top 5 rank, you need a supervisor who is going to write enthusiastically about you. They can't just use formal words that we see in certain templates. There should be lines, certain original lines that shows that the person really believes in you. So even if it's a formal relationship, if the person has given you a lot of responsibilities, if the person believes that you're going to achieve certain milestones personally and with the company, then that person is your ideal recommender, even if it's a formal relationship. So don't worry about the kind of relationship you have with the person. The second case you have to consider is if the person is a mentor figure to you. Now, what is a mentor figure? So one way to understand this is that if you have been assigned to a lot of training modules or a lot of orientation or a lot of leadership development role, then it is certain that the person is a mentor figure to you. The person is not just looking at you as a resource to be utilized for the project. The person is also looking at you as a future leader. So already that mentor figure sees something unique in you. Now it's very easy to go to that person and request for a recommendation letter. They can verbalize certain aspects of your candidacy that none of your previous recommenders could do. So it's a great opportunity if your current supervisor is also a mentor figure. They will write some exceptional recommendation letter. Now you have to manage that communication delicately. You have to offer context, you have to share your short-term goal, you have to share your vision or long-term goal that you've written for your essays. And that should sound authentic. It should be authentic. Then they will believe in you. Then they will write a great recommendation letter. So ideally, your current supervisor must be a mentor figure. The third case that you have to consider is whether you're working for a startup, mid-size, or a large company. Now, if you're working for a startup, the budgets are small. They really rely on you to deliver. They really rely on you to grow with the company. So if you go and share your MBA plan, that will sound like a big, big betrayal. So you have to be very careful. You have to gauge what is happening here. Now, if the founder or CEO or CXO knows that you had certain plans to transition or you've had this communication with him, then it will not be a big surprise. But if you have been deep into delivering and offering a lot of value recently, there are a lot of high profile ups and downs. And now you go and share that, okay, I want to do an MBA and get out of this company. The person might not take it well. So you have to understand that dynamic, whether it's worth taking that risk. And what are the opportunities for you? If this job doesn't work out, if you go to the job market right now, whether there are opportunities. So this is a valid concern and you should really think about it. So startups, it's highly risky, even if it's a current supervisor, even if it's a mentor figure, it's true risky. So you have to find someone in VP role, someone who's a team lead role. And if you have already asked a team lead or VP role, then there might be some perspective that the admissions team is not receiving from those letters. So you have to go back to your letter, or you can work with FNGMAT. We offer a recommendation letter editing service where we coordinate with the supervisor so that you don't have to be in the middle of the process. We take care of the entire process. And that way we can ensure that the essays we have edited and the recommendation letter we are editing with the supervisor, it should all read like it is talking about the same person. A lot of times what I've seen is that the essays is a hero's journey and the recommendation letter is like a typical letter talking about a professional. There is a clear mismatch. So with FNGMA's recommendation letter editing service, we make sure that that doesn't happen. Be cautious when you approach startup founders or CEOs. There is certainly a risk. Now, if you go to large companies and if you work in the CEO's office, it's a great endorsement. If you work in a mid-size or large mid-size company and you work closely with the CEO, that is the sweet spot because they will have just enough time to invest in your recommendation letter, maybe 1 to 2 hours, but they are known enough in the business school community that that title matters. So if the person is a CEO and the admissions, the business school community knows about the company and you are getting that recommendation letter from that person, it's a big win. But now let's take this size of the company to a Fortune 500 company or a large company and you're getting a recommendation letter from a CEO. It's a big deal. But the challenge is that if you have not worked closely with that CEO, then your entire narrative will fall apart because there is no way the person has a clear idea on what your career path has been, what you achieved, what you did over the past 3 to 5 years. The person is just doing an obligation. And in many cases, it could be secretaries or other assistant staff who will be completing the letter and the person just signs off. So there is a certain lack of personalization in getting recommendation letter from really high profile CEOs. You should understand where you stand in terms of your relationship with the CXO or the CEO. The second factor you have to consider is their writing style. If you're working in technology, consulting, or finance, the process is pretty straightforward. The supervisor might have enough experience of writing recommendation letters, so you don't have to worry too much about their experience writing letters. But if you're working in any industry outside these three top industries, that is manufacturing, automobile, pharma, the government, non-profit, you really have to figure out a way to manage the recommendation letter writing process. Because most likely these supervisors don't have much experience writing recommendation letters. So you have to be very careful. You have to coordinate. You can share FNGMAT's guideline document where we work with you to figure out your strength and weakness and contextualize for a supervisor to write about it. There are different processes involved to get a good recommendation letter. And one of our deliverable is the guideline document. So you can get a guideline document from us for that particular school, for your profile. With the guideline document, these supervisors can write great letters compared to writing letters just like that with no template. So I would recommend some assistance if you are working in an industry outside of technology, finance, or consulting. Now, the second factor about writing experience is if the person is coming from the technology industry. Most of the time, what happens is that If you are getting really deep into technology, you slowly lose your communication skills, especially written communication, because you're working with machines or codes or people who talk about machines and talk about codes. So there is a certain common vocabulary and common thinking that comes across in their writing. It is not a persuasive format. If you read recommendation letters written by technologists or finance professionals, there will be a lot of jargons and technical terms, and they are not fully aware that a general reader, like the admissions person, is unlikely to know everything about their industry or their function. So you need some coordination to make sure that the contributions you have captured in the essays is also reflected in the letter in a similar format. Even if you're working with your current supervisor, if that person has been working only in technology or finance and has been working continuously in that particular niche for the past 15 to 20 years, yeah, their communication has slowly eroded, or it has become super specialized for that particular industry or function. So you need some assistance. You can always reach out to me, Atul Jose, at editor at FNGMAT for any assistance around recommendation letter editing. Third factor you have to understand is the country where you are residing. For example, one client in Japan was really struggling to get a recommendation letter. So eventually I asked him what was happening, like why you are taking so much time to even communicate with the. So I got really restless and I asked him, like, why are you taking so much time to even start a communication? It is not even sending a guideline document and asking the supervisor to write. The person couldn't even go to that supervisor and request for a recommendation letter. So later I understood that the culture discourages going to an MBA program. So if you are in any country where the number one revenue, number one export is manufacturing, then it will be a tricky conversation because you want to get out of that technical role and get into management or a leadership role. And the supervisor not just will be surprised, they will be kind of insulted because you're going against the culture of the country. So it's much more insulting when you go against the culture of the country compared to going against the culture of the company. So you have to be very careful. And when I worked with a client from Japan, eventually I couldn't get that recommendation letter from the current supervisor. It was too risky for that person. The person would have lost his job. So I had to go with a team lead in a different country. But that person had a different perspective about MBA program because the person was surrounded by MBA. So he saw the impact of what an MBA program can do to that function. So he was very enthusiastic in his recommendation letter. The phrasing were very interesting but unique, and there were a lot of positive energy there. So if the culture doesn't value an MBA program, it doesn't make sense to go to your current supervisor and ask for a recommendation letter. It'll backfire. It'll backfire in two aspects. One, you might lose your job. Second, the letter might not be impressive. Or third, you have to go get a translator. So it's a huge problem to solve. To summarize, if you're going for a current supervisor, prioritize supervisors with whom you have a mentor-mentee relationship because that person will write extra for you. And if you have just a formal relationship with your supervisor, ideally get a guideline document from us. We'll share it with you. There are certain elements or certain traits and values you need to highlight depending on the schools you're targeting. And that will really help your supervisor who has a formal relationship with you. If you are working in any country or industry or function where an MBA is not valued, I would suggest that you reach out to suppliers, clients, or partners who has a lot of exposure to MBAs and they recognizes the value of an MBA. In that case, the letter will be much more interesting and persuasive, and it will be much more impactful because you are getting feedback from a client or a supplier. So without clients and suppliers, there is no business. This is a good alternative to current supervisors. So prioritize current supervisors. This is a risk worth taking. If you have not asked your current supervisor, maybe you round one, you didn't ask your current supervisor, you went with a safe bet, and the person couldn't translate all those experiences working with you into a coherent letter. For any help, reach out to me, Atul Jose, at editor@fngmat.com, or you can subscribe to FNGMAT's recommendation letter editing service at store.fngmat.com/recommendation-letter.